Hey guys, welcome to a new day on the shop. Today, we're going to be trying to pull this motor. Yeah. Alright, if you have been keeping up or kind of tagging along with this build, this is a 1980 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. It's got a 350 with GM Performance heads. It's got long tube headers. It's got shorty exhaust on it, which comes out right at the front of the rear axle. It's got a Turbo 400 with a shift kit in it. It's got 456 gears in the rear. It's got a different cam. I can't remember the specs on it. It's got a 650 carb on it. New plugs, wires have been cleaned up, and the other day I was driving to the DMV to register said vehicle, and I went from having 40 psi of oil pressure to 0. So I pulled over, looked at everything, thought I had lost some oil. I think there's a blockage on top of not only a blockage, but I also think that the shaft that spins the oil pump is gone. This motor has not really been ran a whole lot in 15 years. The last time it was looked over really well was 15 years ago. I've been driving it around a little bit, harsh on it sometimes, not really too bad, but we're doing a refresh. We're going to pull the whole thing out, pull it all apart, check all the tolerances and everything, buy what we need new. It's going to get a new water pump, it's going to get a new oil pump. Probably new bearings if they don't look good. They have even the slightest bit of scarring on them. I'm going to replace them. Everything else should be pretty much new from 15 years ago, with probably about 5 at most 10,000 miles on the new components, so it really hasn't had a whole lot of push on it. It's got a new radiator. It's got an aftermarket fan. And components that just need to be cleaned up. So it's a black exterior, got some 15 by 8s in the front, 15 by 10s in the rear, stretched out with a 245. White interior, which is going to be redone one day and possibly all go black. So that's how it's going. It's got a 4-inch cowl hood that goes on here. It's unpainted and has been unpainted for 15 years. So it has a little patina to it. Makes it look gangster. So yeah, our next step is pull the motor and get it on an engine stand and then start pulling all this apart. So the next deal, which we're going to have to do, is unbolt the trans, unbolt the, it's not a flywheel. I can never remember this. It's not a pressure plate. It's a, you guessed it, I can't remember. So we're going to pull all that off. We're going to unbolt the headers because we're just going to come straight up with it. I'm just going to leave the exhaust in here. The transmission, I'm thinking about taking one of the bolts that goes to the back of the engine and just making a brace so it doesn't teeter-totter and fall down. It shouldn't, because the drive shaft's in there and everything's going to stay the same. I just don't want a chance of it. We'll probably push this car out once we pull the engine, and so we have time and space, because I got a little too many projects in here. The laser has got some electrical issues, so with dealing with the sensors and stuff like that, that's why it's still in here. We've got more parts, and we're going to have more parts. So we're going to try and get that running soon. The deal with the wiring in here, some of this, it doesn't look too bad, but some of it's going to be redone. This stuff is going to probably be redone in a different manner, and I got to add an electric choke. So now that all that's said, and you've looked back at my other video if you haven't already seen it, with what actually happened that day, and me pulling off the crank pulley and then 5 quarts of oil just dumping out all over the floor and in that bucket. So yeah, We're gonna do a little resto to this. So let's get to it on this hot day. All right, so I had to take a break because I had to get my bags out and start putting the writing on them. I found this is my third engine that I've rebuilt in like less than a year. So, and it's my car. Well, that one's not mine, but mostly it's my cars that I'm rebuilding engines for. So, yeah. It's good to have organization, and you get used to it, and you get more better. You get better at it every single time, so you try and keep everything organized so you know where it goes back, and you don't end up with extra bolts, or bolts you have no clue where they go. So yeah, organization is the key. And if you've seen, I've gotten wrong stuff. Most of the accessories that are attached to the engine, I've pulled them off. Starting to work on the exhaust, starting to get the rest of the wiring and everything off. Gonna be pulling the distributor soon, the exhaust manifold soon. Still got to get up underneath and pull the bolts out of the trans and all that. So and for weight wise, to get this thing out of here, I'm going to break down as much as possible so it's not too heavy on the engine stand, because I have a feeling it's going to be extremely heavy on the engine stand. So we're going to break down as much as we possibly can, which probably means intake's gone, all the way to probably the heads are going to be pulled off as well, just to get it on the engine stand. So let's get back to this and get my organization under wraps. Alright, so we got, as you saw, the carburetor out, the fuel pump, just pulled all the spark plugs out, disconnected one of the headers. I'll probably disconnect it the whole way just so it just falls out of place whenever I pull this engine out. Same thing for the driver's side. It's loose right now, as you see. The bolts are finger tight. I still got to get up underneath. I pulled the inspection pan off. It's kind of stuck by the starter. So I'm going to have to get down there and just handle it. The trans to the engine, the bolts, I don't know, I guess they sent them with an impact because they are difficult to get off. They didn't play. So, but everything else I've sprayed off with some PB Blaster. Try and loosen it up. So yeah, we're gonna get back to it and pull some more off and disconnect the engine from the transmission, and then hook the chain hoist up to it and pop the mounts loose, drop the headers, drop the starter, boop, should pop right out. So that's what we're gonna do. I got a mess of oil everywhere, so I've got to clean that up too. So yeah, stand by. Engine is separated from the transmission. You kind of can't see that via bolts. Starter's dropped, exhaust is undone on both sides. Motor mounts, bolts are gone. I've got to take the intake manifold off. That's how I'm going to lift it up, is possibly just taking the intake manifold off. And what else? Let's see. I'm going to undo the exhaust so that the headers are free floating. I shouldn't have to, but it'll probably make it easier in the long run. And I might wrap them and make them pretty. This engine, this look is going to go away, and it's going to look completely different once it gets all put back together. So my conquest right now, after doing all the other stuff, is going to be pulling the intake and strapping it to the engine hoist just right there and pulling this thing out. So let's do that. Alright, so learning as we go. I should have taken the rocker covers off before taking the intake manifold off. Kind of ideal. There's just a lot of crud. The engine inside looks really good. The engine up under the intake plenum looks excellent. Everything is looking really good for the fact of it being an unopened engine for 15 years. So, but my other issue is there's a lot of debris as of silicone and RTV everywhere. There's excess of it, and that can clog up a pickup, and that might be what the issue is. Because I mean, like this gasket shouldn't have anything on it, but they've siliconed all around it, and you got multiple just pieces of silicone and RTV. So, alright, well, got that done. Now it's time to bolt up the head, or the heads, or whatever, wherever I'm doing this, and pull this thing out. I'll probably end up putting a couple bolts here and there to the back of the head, to the front of the heads, and I've got a balancing, whatever you want to call that, puller. So that's probably what I'll end up doing, is just bolting it to the heads. I think that's the easiest way. So we're going to pull this thing out now. Let's get to it. All right, so, well, yeah, we got it on the engine stand. I want to leave the engine hoist right here just while I'm waiting to work on it, just to make sure that this thing doesn't decide it's going to bend and fall on the ground. I walk in tomorrow or the next day and it's on the ground. So, like I said, everything in here looks pretty nice. I mean, even the push rods. The push rods look good. The rockers look good. Oil looks good. Interior just looks clean. And then we have that. So that's all going to get cleaned up. It also looks like one of the motor mounts is busted. So that's going to be another issue. So new motor mount. The wiring that you see right there, that's all going to get cleaned up and look a heck of a lot better. This whole engine bay is going to look completely different than it did with this yellow engine. It is hot today. It's like 110 degrees inside. This is like an oven in here. So, yeah. So in the next video, we're going to be diving into this, tearing it apart, making sure we order all the parts we need to get this thing back on the road. Performance ready, strip ready, street ready, and reliable at the same time. I mean, I'm going to stick with a 650 for right now. So the 650 should put down about 350 up to 400, I'm guessing. With the turbo 400, it's got a 3500 stall torque converter that needs to be changed out because I want to start street driving this. The rear end has 456 gears in it, which also need to be changed because it's hard to drive on the street with 456 gears. It's not ideal because you can't drive anywhere over 55 really and cruise. It just doesn't sound too good. Not good for the engine and not good for the drivetrain. If you saw, I had to modify this a little bit because it was hitting the bumper. So, I had to make it a little bit longer. Here's the actual bolt hole that actually goes back here because this whole thing's been extended because it wasn't meant for what I do with it. But it works. This is kind of a tail hitch 2x2 insert piece, which is pretty thick. It's like 1/4 inch. So it will hold this thing forever. Yeah, we're going to get all this stuff cleaned up. Look at the rings, look at the bearings, look at everything. See why my oil pump's not working. If it's just clogged or whatever. So, and that's on the next video. So if you stuck around this long, really appreciate it. Hopefully you liked the video. If you did, and you like watching me sweat a whole bunch and get dirty and nasty and drop stuff all over the ground like normal, come back and join again for another episode. Subscribe, comment if you have anything you want to say, or call me out on. I get called out on a lot of stuff because my OSHA standards aren't OSHA standards. They're do as I say, not as I do standards. Because whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Anyway, thanks for joining in again. Till next time.